The Hells Angels biker saw the little girl holding a soldier's tag, and the truth behind it broke his steady voice. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. On a cold, foggy afternoon, Marcus Steele Thompson, a grizzled Hells Angels biker, was making his way down a desolate road when something caught his attention. He was a man known for his intimidating presence, his black leather vest adorned with the unmistakable Hells Angels patches. His large motorcycle roared beneath him, cutting through the mist like a predator on the prowl. But as his headlights sliced through the thick fog, they landed on something that stopped him dead in his tracks. A little girl, no older than 7, was sitting on the roadside, holding something in her small, trembling hands. At first, it seemed like a regular child, lost or abandoned. But the item she clutched so tightly was what caught his attention, a worn and faded military dog tag. The tag had scratches that told of years of travel, perhaps from war, and the name inscribed on it seemed all too familiar to him. His heart skipped a beat. Marcus slowly rolled his bike to a stop, the rumble of the engine silencing as the cold wind swept over him. He dismounted and approached cautiously, his boots crunching against the gravel. The little girl didn't seem frightened. Instead, she looked up at him with wide, innocent eyes. "Are you okay, little one?" Marcus's voice was deep, gravelly, but he softened it as best as he could. The girl didn't speak at first, only clutching the dog tag even tighter, as if it was the only thing keeping her grounded. Marcus knelt down in front of her, his leather jacket creaking under the strain, and gently reached for the dog tag in her hand. "Where did you get this?" he asked, though the question burned in his mind. It was clear now, this was no ordinary tag. This was the tag of a soldier, and Marcus had seen it before. The name on it, the same one from his past, sent a chill down his spine. The little girl finally spoke, her voice soft, barely above a whisper. "It's my daddy's," she said. "He gave it to me before he went away." Marcus froze. The name on the dog tag, the same soldier he had known during his time in the military, came rushing back to him. This little girl was the daughter of someone he once fought alongside, someone who had died in a mission gone wrong years ago. The truth behind this tag hit him like a freight train. Marcus had always carried the weight of his past, the memories of lost comrades, and now it seemed fate had brought him face to face with one of their legacies. The girl looked up at him with those wide, trusting eyes, unaware of the connection that was about to change everything for both of them. In that moment, Marcus's steady voice broke, something deep inside him cracking as he realized the weight of the responsibility he now felt. It was no longer just about the club, the brothers, or the road. It was about this little girl, her lost past, and the truth that had been buried in time. He knew what he had to do, but what he didn't expect was how much it would tear him apart. I was stunned by the little girl's simple words. "It's my daddy's," she said again, her small hands gripping the dog tag tighter, as if afraid someone might take it from her. Her eyes looked up at me, full of trust and innocence, but behind those eyes, I could see the pain of loss. I swallowed hard, the weight of her words pressing down on me like a ton of bricks. This wasn't just any dog tag. This was the dog tag of my old comrade, Sergeant Michael "Mikey" Rivers. We had served together in Afghanistan, both of us surviving hell and back, until the day Mikey didn't come home. I had never expected to see anything related to him again, let alone in the hands of a little girl, his daughter, whom I had never known existed. I felt a lump form in my throat, and for a brief moment, I couldn't find my voice. I had lost so many, but Mikey was different. He was one of the good ones, and I owed him my life. And now, here was his daughter, alone, holding the piece of him I thought was gone forever. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "Where's your mom, little one?" I asked, my voice surprisingly gentle considering the storm of emotions inside me. She looked at me for a moment, then pointed down the road. "She's at the house," she said, her tone far too calm for a child in her situation. "She told me to stay here and wait for someone to help." "I'm here now," I said, offering a small, reassuring smile, though I didn't feel like smiling at all. My mind was racing. I had never imagined this moment. Never thought I'd be standing in front of a young girl who was carrying the weight of my fallen comrade's legacy. Mikey's daughter, his flesh and blood, was now in my care, and I couldn't just walk away. I glanced at the little girl again, noticing the dirt on her face, the way her clothes hung too loosely on her tiny frame, and the look in her eyes that seemed far too old for someone so young. She had been through a lot already. I couldn't leave her alone. I crouched down to her level, gently taking her by the hand. "Come on, let's get you somewhere safe," I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside. I helped her up, noticing how fragile she seemed as she stood beside me, her small feet slipping a little on the gravel. I didn't know what I expected, but it wasn't this. I had no idea what had happened to her mother, but I wasn't about to leave her alone either. As we started walking down the road towards the house, I could feel my resolve hardening. There was no going back now. I wasn't just going to leave this girl in the hands of whoever was out there. Mikey had been my brother, and now his daughter needed me. I would not fail her like I failed him. The house came into view, a small, weather-worn cabin tucked away at the edge of the woods. It looked like the kind of place someone would disappear to, someone trying to escape. The windows were dark, and there was no sign of movement. As we approached, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The little girl, still holding her father's dog tag tightly, led the way, her small form moving quickly in front of me. She seemed too used to this, as if she had been down this road many times before. When we reached the door, she knocked lightly. The sound of footsteps came from inside, and the door creaked open slowly, revealing a woman standing in the doorway. She looked tired, her face worn with worry, but there was something else in her eyes, something that made my chest tighten. She was Mikey's wife. I could see it in her eyes, the same eyes that were now looking back at me with confusion and a trace of fear. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice shaky, as if she had seen too many bad days and wasn't sure if this was another one. I stepped forward, trying to make my presence as non-threatening as possible. "I'm Marcus, an old friend of Mikey's," I said. "I found your daughter out there, and she's got something of his." I held up the dog tag. Her eyes went wide, and she reached out instinctively, her hand trembling as she took it from me. "Mikey's tag," she whispered, tears welling up in her eyes. She looked down at her daughter, and for the first time since I had met her, I saw a flicker of something more than just sadness. There was relief. "Thank you," she said quietly, her voice breaking. "I never thought we'd have anything of his again." I nodded, not sure what to say. The emotions were too raw. I couldn't find the words. I could only look at this woman, the woman who had lost so much, and the little girl who had somehow found a piece of her father, a piece of Mikey, that I thought was gone forever. But as much as I wanted to help, I knew this was only the beginning. There was something more going on here, something that didn't add up. And if I was going to honor Mikey's memory, I needed to get to the bottom of it. I had promised him I'd look out for his family. And now, that promise was all that mattered. The silence in the small house was heavy, filled with an unspoken understanding. I could feel it in the air, thick with emotion and unsaid words. Mikey's wife, Maria, stood in front of me, clutching the dog tag to her chest like it was the only thing left of her husband. Her eyes, tired from years of worry and loss, locked onto mine, and for a brief moment, I saw something I hadn't expected: hope. It was a fleeting thing, like a candle flickering in the wind, but it was there. I had never imagined that finding Mikey's daughter would feel like this. A part of me had hoped for some closure, but what I felt now was something else entirely. I was caught in the middle of a family's grief, a child's innocence, and a past I couldn't escape. "Thank you for bringing her home," Maria said, her voice trembling. "You don't know what this means to us." I could see the struggle in her face, the tightness in her jaw, like she was fighting to hold it all together. "I promised Mikey I'd look after his family if anything happened," I said, my voice rough. "I'm not going anywhere." She nodded, wiping a tear from her cheek. "I thought I had lost him completely. This means more than you'll ever know." I didn't know what to say. Words felt hollow, useless in the face of her pain. Instead, I just nodded, my gaze moving to her daughter, the little girl who had saved me without even knowing it. She was sitting on the couch, still clutching her father's dog tag, her small hands curled around it like a lifeline. The storm outside had quieted, but the storm inside felt like it was only just beginning. Maria went to the kitchen, leaving me alone with the little girl. I walked over to her, crouching down so I was eye level with her. "You okay?" I asked softly. She nodded, her eyes wide but calm, as though she understood more than a 7-year-old should. I miss my daddy, she whispered, her voice barely audible. It broke me in ways I didn't know were possible. I know, I said, my heart aching. I know you do, but you're not alone, okay? I'm here, and I'll take care of you. Just like I promised your dad. She didn't answer, but she didn't have to. Her trust was enough. It was then that I noticed the picture frame on the mantel. A photo of Mikey, standing tall. In his uniform, his signature grin on his face. I had never seen this photo before, but it was a reminder of everything he had been, brave, loyal, and proud. I stood up and walked over to it, my hand brushing lightly over the frame. I'll make sure she's okay, Mikey, I whispered, as if he could hear me. I had to make sure of it. I had no choice now. The weight of the promise I had made to him all those years ago was more than I could bear. Just as I turned back to the couch, a knock at the door broke the silence. It wasn't a polite knock. It was urgent, sharp, and demanding. My instincts kicked in immediately. I glanced at Maria, who had come out of the kitchen, her face pale. Stay inside, I said to her, my voice low but firm. Lock the door, and don't open it for anyone. Maria nodded, her eyes wide with fear. I went to the door, peering through the small window. My heart skipped a beat when I saw who it was. 2 men in dark coats, their faces obscured by shadows. They didn't look like anyone I knew, but something about them felt off, like they were searching for something. I didn't open the door. Instead, I stepped back and reached for the phone. Who's there? I called out, trying to keep my voice steady. We need to talk to you, one of the men said. It's about the little girl. My blood ran cold. I wasn't sure who these men were, but I knew enough to trust my instincts. They weren't here for a friendly conversation. I had to protect Maria and her daughter. Without thinking, I signaled to Maria, who quickly locked herself and the girl in the back room. The men continued to knock, their voices growing more insistent. My mind raced, calculating the best way to handle this. I wasn't about to let anyone take her from me. Just then my phone buzzed. It was a text message from one of the brothers from the club, Steele. I unlocked the phone and read the message. The men outside are dangerous. They're not who they say they are. Get out of there now. My heart sank. The situation was worse than I thought. These men were here for a reason, and it wasn't to return a lost child's dog tag. They were after something bigger, something I wasn't prepared for. Without wasting another second, I grabbed my jacket, pulled the girl's hand gently, and motioned for Maria to follow me. We're leaving, I said, my voice steady. It's not safe here. As we snuck out the back door, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The danger that had found us tonight was just the tip of the iceberg. I had no idea what lay ahead, but one thing was certain. I wasn't going to let anything happen to Mikey's family. Not on my watch. As I pulled Maria and her daughter through the back door, I could hear the knocking getting more urgent, more frantic. The sound of the men's fists pounding against the door echoed in the small house, and I could feel the pressure mounting. They knew we were inside, and they weren't going to leave until they got what they wanted. My heart raced as I led them down the narrow hallway to the small side door that led to the woods. Maria looked terrified, but she didn't question me. She trusted me, and that trust meant everything now. We had no time to waste. The wind outside was biting cold, but I didn't care. I pulled my jacket tighter around me, shielding Maria and her daughter as we slipped into the dark of the forest. Stay close, I muttered, my voice low, barely a whisper in the night. The trees around us were dense, their branches heavy with the weight of the recent storm. The ground was wet, and the air smelled of damp earth. The only sounds were our footsteps crunching on the underbrush and the distant growl of the wind. We made our way through the woods in silence, the tension so thick it was suffocating. Maria held on to her daughter's hand tightly, not letting go for a second. Her eyes flicked nervously over her shoulder, as though she could still hear the men's voices. I didn't blame her. I could feel the danger closing in, too. We were outnumbered, and whoever those men were, they weren't here for a friendly chat. They were here for something more, something bigger, and I had no intention of letting them get it. We reached the edge of the forest, where the small, run-down cabin I had stashed my bike was waiting. The bike was my escape, my means of getting away from anything that threatened me. I had no plan, but I knew one thing. I wasn't leaving Maria and her daughter behind. I turned to Maria, my hand on her shoulder. We're going to take the bike. I know it's not ideal, but it's our best chance. Her eyes widened, but she nodded quickly. Where are we going? She asked, her voice trembling. I hesitated for a moment, looking down at her daughter, who was now clutching the dog tag in her hand. I could see the fear in the girl's eyes, but there was something else too, something I hadn't noticed before. A quiet strength. We're going to head to the nearest town, I said, my voice steady. We'll lay low for a while, figure out what's going on. But right now, we need to get moving. Can you do that? Maria nodded again, her face grim. She wasn't asking questions anymore. She was following my lead. That was what mattered. I grabbed my helmet, put it on, and then helped Maria onto the bike, keeping her daughter in front of her. I could hear the distant hum of motorcycles in the air, and I knew that time was running out. We had to get away before the men outside realized we were gone. I revved the engine, and the bike roared to life, cutting through the night like a beast on the hunt. The road was long, winding through the hills, and I could feel the weight of every turn pressing down on me. My thoughts raced. Who were those men? What did they want with the girl? I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just about Mikey's dog tag anymore. There was something much bigger at play, something I wasn't prepared for. The town wasn't far, but it felt like we were riding into the unknown, and that was a dangerous place to be. As we reached the edge of the forest, I glanced over my shoulder, checking for any sign of the men who had been following us. The coast seemed clear, but I wasn't about to relax. Not yet. We kept riding for miles, the wind whipping past us, the cold air biting at my skin. My mind kept going back to the little girl and her father's dog tag. She was just a child, but she carried the weight of her father's legacy. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that the dog tag was only the beginning. Whoever those men were, they had their eyes on something far more dangerous. And I was going to find out what it was, no matter what it took. The town appeared in the distance, a small cluster of lights against the vast darkness. I slowed down as we approached, keeping my eyes peeled for any signs of danger. Maria and her daughter were quiet now, but I could feel the tension between us. We were all thinking the same thing. What now? As I pulled into the small motel parking lot, I killed the engine and looked around. The place looked empty, like it had been closed for years. There was no one in sight, but I wasn't taking any chances. I motioned for Maria to stay close as I helped her and her daughter off the bike. We're going to lay low here for a while, I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. Stay inside. I'll keep watch. Maria didn't argue. She nodded and moved inside the motel room, her daughter following closely behind. I stood outside for a moment, staring out at the darkened road. I didn't know what was coming next, but I was ready for whatever it was. I had made a promise to Mikey, and I wasn't going to break it. Not now, not ever. I stood outside the motel room, the cold air biting at my skin as I kept watch over the empty parking lot. The motel was quiet, too quiet, but I knew better than to let my guard down. I had barely been able to sleep since we arrived, my mind racing with thoughts of the men who had come knocking at Maria's door. Who were they? What did they want with Mikey's daughter? And why were they so desperate to find us? I glanced at the room behind me. Maria and her daughter were inside, probably trying to rest after the night's chaos, but I knew that the danger wasn't over. It was just beginning. I had to keep moving, keep them safe. I couldn't let my emotions cloud my judgment. Not when so much was at stake. I took a deep breath and turned away from the motel, making my way toward the back of the property. The small town outside was eerily still, with only the occasional car passing by. The streets were dimly lit, and the sound of my boots on the cracked pavement echoed in the night air. It was too quiet. Something didn't feel right. As I walked, I tried to piece together the events of the past few days. Finding Maria's daughter with Mikey's dog tag in her hand had hit me harder than I cared to admit. I'd promised Mikey I'd look out for his family, and now I was looking at his daughter, the last piece of him in this world. The more I thought about it, the more questions I had. Who were those men? Why had they been looking for her? The danger was real, and I wasn't sure I was ready for whatever was coming. I turned the corner and spotted a diner, its neon sign flickering in the distance. The place looked like it had seen better days, but I wasn't here for the food. I needed answers. I pushed open the door, the bell above it ringing softly. The interior was small, with a handful of booths and an old jukebox in the corner. An elderly waitress stood behind the counter, wiping down glasses. She glanced up when I entered, her eyes narrowing as she took in my appearance. I could feel her assessing me, trying to figure out if I was trouble. "What can I get you?" she asked, her voice tired but friendly. Coffee, I said, taking a seat at the counter. I didn't need food. I needed information. As she poured the coffee, I couldn't help but notice the way her hands shook. It was subtle, but it was there. I wasn't the only one on edge. You look like you've seen a ghost, the waitress said, sliding the cup of coffee across the counter to me. I took a sip, the warmth seeping into my bones, but it didn't calm the storm inside me. You wouldn't believe it if I told you, I replied, keeping my voice low. She studied me for a moment, then nodded as if she understood. You're not the first one looking for answers around here, she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. What do you mean? I asked, leaning in slightly. She glanced around, making sure no one was listening before speaking again. There's been talk. Strange men showing up, asking questions. They were here earlier today, just like you. They're looking for someone, but no one's sure who. My blood ran cold. The men, the ones I had been running from. What do they want? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. She shook her head. I don't know, but they've been asking about a little girl. You wouldn't happen to know anything about that, would you? I stiffened, my hand tightening around the coffee cup. I think I might, I said slowly. They're looking for her. The waitress looked at me, her face a mixture of concern and curiosity. You have to be careful, she said quietly. Those men are dangerous. They're not just looking for anyone. They're looking for something specific, something that could change everything. And they'll stop at nothing to get it. I felt my stomach tighten. This was bigger than I had imagined. It wasn't just about Mikey's dog tag. Whatever those men were after, it was something far more dangerous. Thanks for the heads up, I said, standing up and leaving a tip on the counter. As I walked back to the motel, my mind raced. I had to protect Maria and her daughter. They were in more danger than I had realized, and I wasn't about to let anyone take them from me. I had promised Mikey, and that promise was everything. But now, I was starting to wonder if I was in over my head. As I approached the room, I saw Maria standing at the door, her face pale. Marcus, she said, her voice trembling. They're here. My heart sank. The men had found us. And this time, I wasn't sure we were going to make it out alive. I rushed inside, locking the door behind me. Maria and her daughter were standing by the window, looking out into the night. We need to leave, I said urgently. They're here, and we don't have much time. Maria nodded, her face filled with fear. She didn't argue. She knew as well as I did that we were running out of options. I grabbed my jacket and turned to the girl, who was still holding her father's dog tag tightly in her hand. Stay close, I said, my voice steady despite the panic rising inside me. We're going to get through this. I won't let them take you. But even as I said the words, I knew things were about to get a whole lot worse. The knock at the door sent a jolt of panic through me. It was sharp, quick, purposeful. They were here. The men who had been hunting us down. I glanced at Maria, her face pale and stricken with fear. She had been through enough, and now we were in even more danger than I had realized. I had no choice but to act. Get to the back, I whispered urgently. Lock the door behind you. Stay quiet. Maria nodded without hesitation, taking her daughter by the hand as she hurried into the back room. I could hear the sound of her voice muffled, but I couldn't focus on that now. I had to protect them. I turned to the window, my mind racing. The motel was still quiet, but I knew the danger was closing in. I had no idea who these men were, but I knew one thing for sure. They weren't just after the dog tag. They were after something bigger, something I wasn't prepared for. I pulled my jacket tighter around me and moved toward the door, my heart pounding in my chest. The knock came again, this time louder, more insistent. Marcus, I muttered under my breath. Don't screw this up. The plan was simple. Stall, find a way to get Maria and her daughter out of here, and make sure the men never got close enough to hurt them. I wasn't sure how, but I would figure it out. I stepped to the side of the door, taking a deep breath to steady myself. I couldn't afford to be nervous, not now. I had made a promise to Mikey, and I wasn't about to break it. The door creaked open just a crack. I saw a man standing there, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a dark coat. His face was partially hidden by the shadows, but I could see the cold, calculating look in his eyes. We need to talk, he said, his voice low but firm. I didn't open the door any wider. I wasn't letting him in. What do you want? I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. We're not here to make small talk, he replied, his tone turning more threatening. We're looking for a little girl, and you're in our way. I felt my blood run cold. They were after her, Maria's daughter. I had been right. This wasn't just about a dog tag. These men wanted something far more dangerous. I don't know what you're talking about, I said, trying to sound convincing, though every fiber of my being screamed at me to lie. He didn't buy it. Don't play dumb with us, he said, his voice sharpening. We know she's here. We know you're hiding her. I didn't flinch. I had to keep it together. You need to leave, I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. We're not going anywhere until we get what we came for, he replied, his hand moving to the waistband of his pants. I couldn't let this escalate. I couldn't let them find Maria or her daughter. You're not going to get anything from me, I said, my voice hardening. The man smirked, clearly not intimidated. You're making a mistake, buddy, he said, his voice dripping with menace. You really want to protect her? You're making a big mistake. My heart pounded in my chest as I stared him down. I couldn't let him get inside, couldn't let him see Maria and her daughter. I needed a way out, a way to escape. The man's hand was still on his waist, and I could tell he was reaching for something. I wasn't sure what, but I knew I didn't have much time. I needed to make a move. Suddenly, the door behind me creaked. I turned, panic rising in my chest as I saw Maria and her daughter standing in the hallway, frozen with fear. My heart stopped. Go back, I shouted, but it was too late. The man in the doorway turned, his eyes locking onto Maria and her daughter. I could see the cold recognition in his eyes, and I knew right then that he wasn't here to negotiate. He was here to take them. I lunged forward, my hand grabbing the door and slamming it shut. The man in the doorway pushed back, forcing the door open. No, I shouted, struggling against him. The door slammed open, and I could see him reaching for something at his belt. I didn't have time to think. I shoved him back with all my strength, knocking him off balance. I heard him curse under his breath, but I wasn't stopping. I had to get Maria and her daughter out of here. I turned to them, my voice sharp. Run, get out of here. Maria hesitated for a moment, fear in her eyes, but then she nodded. Come on, sweetie, she said to her daughter, pulling her along as they sprinted down the hall. I turned back to face the man, my heart racing. He was getting up, his hand going for the weapon at his side. I had to act fast. I grabbed the nearest chair and swung it at him, knocking him back against the wall. It wasn't enough to stop him, but it gave me just enough time to get to the window. I yanked it open, the sound of glass shattering filling the air. Go, I shouted, my voice hoarse. Maria and her daughter had already reached the back door. I didn't wait for the man to recover. I grabbed my jacket, sprinting after them. We had no plan, no idea where we were going, but I knew one thing. I wasn't letting them get away. Not without a fight. We ran through the darkened streets, the sound of our footsteps muffled by the wet pavement. My heart pounded in my chest, but I couldn't afford to stop. We had to keep moving, keep ahead of the danger that was closing in fast. Maria and her daughter were right behind me, their breath shallow and fast, but we couldn't stop. Not now. The streetlights cast long shadows on the ground, but I couldn't take my eyes off the road ahead. Every instinct told me to keep running, keep moving, but my mind was still reeling from what had just happened. Those men, they were relentless. I couldn't shake the feeling that they knew exactly who we were and what we had. The dog tag. It wasn't just a piece of Mikey's past. It was a key, a clue to something much bigger, and they would stop at nothing to get it. The weight of that realization settled heavily on my shoulders. I had promised Mikey that I would protect his family, but now it felt like I was running blind. We were cornered, with no way out. The town was small, and the roads ahead didn't offer much in the way of escape. I needed a plan, but first we had to get away. I looked over my shoulder, just for a moment, but that moment was enough. I saw a dark figure moving toward us, another one of the men. They were everywhere. It was as if they were waiting for us, like they knew exactly where we were going. Hurry, I shouted, urging Maria and her daughter to move faster. The fear in their eyes was too much to bear. I had to get them out of here. I could feel the tension rising as the footsteps grew louder, closer. We were being followed. There was no time to waste. We had to find shelter. I spotted an alleyway up ahead, barely wide enough for the three of us to squeeze through, but it was our only shot. We turned sharply and darted into the darkness, the sound of our footsteps echoing off the brick walls. My mind raced as I tried to figure out what to do next. We couldn't outrun them, not with how close they were. And hiding wasn't an option. They'd find us eventually. I looked around, trying to assess our options. There was a narrow door at the end of the alley, barely visible in the dark, but it was locked. I didn't have time to waste. I grabbed a metal pipe from the ground and used it to force the door open. It creaked loudly, but I didn't care. We had to get inside. I pulled Maria and her daughter through the door and slammed it shut behind us, locking it as best as I could. We were inside, but not safe yet. The room we had entered was small, filled with boxes and old furniture. It looked like an abandoned storage room, but it was better than nothing. I turned to Maria, who was breathing heavily, her face pale with fear. "We'll be okay," I said, though I wasn't sure if I believed it myself. She nodded, but I could see the fear in her eyes. "What now?" she asked, her voice trembling. I didn't have an answer. I needed to think. The sound of footsteps outside grew louder, closer. They were coming. I pressed my ear to the door, trying to listen for any sign of who was out there. I could hear muffled voices, but no clear words. They were looking for us. I couldn't let them find us here. "Stay quiet," I whispered to Maria and her daughter. "Don't make a sound." I turned, looking for any way out of the room. There was a small window at the far end, but it was too high up to reach without a ladder. We were trapped. The footsteps grew louder, and I could feel my heart racing. I had to make a decision, and I had to make it fast. The door handle rattled, and I knew that our time was up. I took a deep breath, my mind spinning. I couldn't let them take Maria and her daughter. Not without a fight. "Listen to me," I said, my voice low and urgent. "I'm going to draw them away from here. You need to get out of here. Find somewhere safe. Stay hidden until I come back for you. Do you understand?" Maria's eyes widened, and she shook her head. "No, I'm not leaving you. We'll stay together." Her voice was firm, but I could see the fear beneath it. "Maria," I said, my voice soft but insistent. "If they get us all, we don't stand a chance. I'm going to make sure they follow me. You have to trust me." She hesitated, but I could see the conflict in her eyes. Finally, she nodded. "Be careful," she said, her voice breaking. I could feel my heart heavy with guilt as I turned away, heading toward the back door of the room. The footsteps outside were growing louder, and I knew we were running out of time. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what I had to do. I had to keep them safe, no matter the cost. I opened the back door quietly and stepped into the alley, keeping to the shadows as much as possible. The men were close, and I had to make sure they didn't know where Maria and her daughter were hiding. I moved quickly, staying in the dark, but every step felt like it could be my last. I had no plan, no way to escape, but I wasn't about to let them win. Not now. Not when Maria and her daughter were depending on me. I could hear the voices getting closer, and I knew I had only seconds left before they found me. I ducked into another alley, hoping to lose them in the maze of dark streets. But I wasn't sure if it was enough. The danger was still there, just a few steps behind me, and I couldn't shake the feeling that it was only going to get worse. The shadows seemed to close in around me as I darted from alley to alley, trying to stay out of sight. The men who had been following us were relentless, and I could hear their voices growing louder with each passing moment. They were getting closer. I had no choice but to keep moving, no matter the cost. The adrenaline was surging through my veins, but I couldn't afford to let my guard down. Not yet. I glanced over my shoulder, but there was no sign of them. For now, at least, I had lost them. But I knew that wouldn't last long. They were too good, too determined. I couldn't keep running forever. I needed a plan. I couldn't risk leading them back to Maria and her daughter. The fear in Maria's eyes when she agreed to trust me weighed heavily on my mind. I had promised to protect them, but how could I do that when I couldn't even protect myself from the men hunting us? My thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps ahead. I froze, listening intently. The last thing I needed was to run straight into them. I held my breath, crouching low behind a pile of crates, praying I wouldn't be spotted. I could hear the men talking in low voices, but they were too far away for me to make out any words. I took a deep breath and started moving again, this time keeping my steps light and silent. I had to find somewhere to hide, somewhere I could regroup and figure out what to do next. The street ahead was empty, but I knew it wouldn't stay that way for long. My heart was racing, my muscles tense, but I couldn't let fear take over. If I let fear control me, I'd be dead before I could make it out of town. I spotted an old bar up ahead, its neon sign flickering in the darkness. It was a dive, no doubt, but it was my best shot at finding somewhere to lay low. I pushed the door open slowly, the old hinges creaking loudly in the silence. I stepped inside, my eyes scanning the dimly lit interior. There was a man sitting at the bar, nursing a drink, but no one else was around. The bartender looked up at me, his face hard and weathered, but he didn't say anything. "Need a drink?" I said gruffly, trying to keep my voice calm. He nodded, not asking any questions, and slid a glass of whiskey across the bar. I took a sip, the warmth of the alcohol settling in my chest, but it didn't ease the tension. I could still feel the danger closing in. The man at the bar watched me for a moment, then looked back at his drink. I tried to keep my eyes from scanning the room too much. I didn't want to give away that I was nervous. I couldn't afford to stand out. As I sat there, trying to calm my nerves, the door opened again. The bartender looked up, but I didn't dare glance toward the entrance. I could feel the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. The door closed softly, and I waited, hoping the new arrival wouldn't notice me. But then I heard it, the faint sound of footsteps. Heavy, deliberate steps. I clenched my jaw, trying to steady my breathing. I didn't want to make a scene, but I couldn't let anyone get too close. I needed a way out. I took another sip of my drink, my eyes still on the bartender, waiting for a sign, anything that would give me an idea of who had just walked in. And then I heard the voice. It was low, smooth, but with an edge of danger to it. "Marcus," the man said, and I froze. It wasn't a question. It wasn't a greeting. It was a statement. I turned slowly, my heart pounding in my chest. Standing there in the doorway was a man I didn't recognize, but I knew exactly who he was. He was one of the men who had been following us. I could see the tattoos on his arms, the cold, calculating look in his eyes. This wasn't a coincidence. He had been waiting for me. "You're looking for something," I said, my voice steady, though inside I was anything but calm. He smiled, but it wasn't friendly. "I'm looking for you, Marcus," he said. "And the girl." I could feel my blood run cold. He didn't say her name, but I knew who he was talking about. Maria's daughter. I clenched my fists, the whiskey burning in my throat. I couldn't let this man get to her. "You're not going to find her," I said, my voice cold and firm. The man didn't flinch. He stepped forward, his gaze never leaving mine. "Oh, I think we will," he said, his smile widening. "It's just a matter of time." I stood up slowly, the glass of whiskey still in my hand. I had to think. I couldn't let him get to Maria and her daughter. I couldn't let them down. But I knew I wasn't going to win this fight by staying here. The man's eyes flicked to the door, and I knew he wasn't just talking about finding her. He was here for me, too. The room felt smaller, the air thicker with tension. I had to act fast. I turned, moving quickly toward the back exit, but the man was faster. He blocked the doorway, his hand resting casually on the gun at his side. I wasn't getting out that way. I needed a distraction. I glanced around the room, my mind racing, looking for something I could use. The bartender was still watching, but I didn't have time to ask for help. I needed to make my own way out. I reached into my jacket and pulled out the old photo of Mikey, the one I had been carrying around with me. I held it up for the man to see. "You don't know what you're messing with," I said, my voice low, my eyes locked on his. The man's expression shifted, just for a second. I saw something flicker in his eyes, a moment of hesitation. It was enough. I darted for the side door, the man's curse echoing in my ears as I pushed through the back exit and into the night. The cold air hit me like a slap, but I didn't slow down. I couldn't afford to. Maria and her daughter were still out there, and I wasn't about to let these men take them. I ran, my mind spinning with fear and adrenaline, but I couldn't stop. Not now. The night air bit at my skin as I sprinted down the alley, my heart pounding louder than my footsteps. I couldn't shake the feeling that the men were still close behind me, their pursuit relentless, but I didn't dare look back. The sound of their footsteps had faded, but I knew that wouldn't last. They were professionals, trained to track and hunt. They would find me. The back streets of the small town blurred around me as I pushed myself faster. I could feel the adrenaline coursing through my veins, but it was the fear of what might happen to Maria and her daughter that fueled me. They were hiding, waiting for me to come back, but I didn't know if I would be able to. I had promised Mikey I would protect them, but now that promise felt like a weight I couldn't carry. The dim streetlights flickered overhead as I cut through another narrow alley. I was getting close to the edge of town, but there was still no sign of a way out. The road ahead was deserted, empty, except for the sound of my own breath and the distant rumble of a car engine. I needed a plan, and fast. I couldn't keep running forever. I needed to get Maria and her daughter out of here. I glanced at the street ahead and spotted a small truck parked near the curb. I could use it to get away, but I had no idea who it belonged to. It didn't matter. I didn't have time to be picky. I darted toward the truck, my hand already reaching for the door handle. The truck was old, worn, but it would work. I threw open the door and slid into the driver's seat, my hands trembling as I fumbled with the ignition. The engine sputtered to life, and I slammed the truck into gear. I wasn't sure where I was going, but I had to get out of here before the men found me. I sped down the road, the headlights cutting through the night. The town was behind me now, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I kept checking the rearview mirror, expecting to see the men's vehicles in pursuit, but there was nothing. The road ahead stretched on, empty and silent. I forced myself to focus, but my mind kept drifting back to Maria and her daughter. Were they okay? Were they still safe? I had to get to them, but I didn't know where to go. The world felt like it was closing in around me. I drove through the empty streets, the truck's engine roaring beneath me, but it didn't feel fast enough. The fear gnawed at me. What if I was too late? What if they had already found them? I had no choice but to keep moving, to trust that Maria and her daughter were still out there. I didn't even know where to start looking. The miles stretched on, but I had no clear destination. I couldn't stay in one place for too long. The truck's tires screeched as I swerved around a corner, but I didn't slow down. I needed to make sure I wasn't being followed. I glanced behind me again, but the road was still empty. Maybe I was safe. For now. I passed through a quiet neighborhood, the houses dark and still. I felt like a ghost, driving through a town that no longer felt like home. My phone buzzed in my pocket, and I nearly jumped out of my skin. I pulled over to the side of the road, my hands still shaking as I reached for the phone. It was a message from Steele. Where are you? They've been asking about you at the clubhouse. We need to know what's going on. My eyes darted over the message, and I took a deep breath. Steele was right. The club needed answers. But right now, the only thing that mattered was getting Maria and her daughter to safety. I didn't respond to the message. I couldn't afford to get distracted. I put the phone back in my pocket and took off again, the tires crunching over the pavement as I sped away. The town had disappeared behind me, but I could still feel the weight of everything that had happened. I was in over my head, but I couldn't stop. I couldn't let them down. I had to protect them. I had promised Mikey. As I drove further into the night, the truck's engine hummed steadily beneath me. The sky was dark, the stars barely visible through the thick clouds overhead. I kept my eyes on the road, trying to keep my mind focused. But the questions kept coming. Who were these men? Why were they after Maria's daughter? And what did they want with Mikey's dog tag? I didn't have answers, but I knew one thing. I was going to find out. And when I did, I wasn't going to let them get away with it. My grip tightened on the steering wheel as I made a sharp turn onto a dirt road. I didn't know where this road would take me, but I had to find a way to lose them, to shake them off my trail. The headlights of the truck cut through the darkness, and the engine roared as I sped down the road. The wind whipped past me, and I could feel the tension easing in my chest. For the first time in hours, I could breathe, but I knew it wouldn't last. The men were still out there, and they were still hunting us. The truck's engine roared through the night as I pushed it faster, the dirt road twisting ahead of me like a serpent. The headlights barely cut through the darkness, the narrow path barely visible in the thick shadows. The air was thick with the smell of dust and exhaust, and my hands were gripping the wheel so tight, I could feel the blood pulsing in my fingertips. I had no plan, no clear destination, but I couldn't stop. Not now. The men were still out there, hunting us, and they wouldn't stop until they got what they wanted. Maria and her daughter were depending on me to protect them, and I wasn't about to let them down. The town was behind me now, the sounds of the chase growing faint, but I knew it was only a matter of time before they found us again. I glanced at the rearview mirror, watching the empty road behind me. No sign of them yet, but I knew better than to relax. I had to stay ahead. I had to keep moving. My mind raced, the fear clawing at me from every direction. Why were they after us? What did they want with Maria's daughter? What was so important about Mikey's dog tag? I didn't have the answers, but I was starting to feel like I was in way over my head. The road ahead was long and empty, the silence pressing down on me, making the truck feel like a cage. I had to get away, but where could I go? The miles stretched on, and I had no clear idea where I was headed. All I knew was that I couldn't stop. The sound of the truck's engine was the only thing breaking the silence, and the steady rhythm of the tires against the gravel was starting to feel like a lullaby, the constant thrum almost soothing. But I couldn't afford to let my guard down. I couldn't get comfortable. I had no idea what was waiting for us, but I knew it wouldn't be good. The road curved sharply to the left, and I pressed the gas pedal harder, feeling the truck lurch beneath me. I had to stay focused. I had to think. The headlights flickered slightly, and for a moment, I thought I saw something in the distance. A pair of headlights, coming toward me. My stomach dropped, and I slammed my foot down on the brake. The truck skidded to a stop, dust flying up behind me. I didn't wait to see if they were following. I threw the truck in reverse, spinning the wheel and backing up as fast as I could. The headlights in front of me grew larger, closer. My heart was hammering in my chest as I fought to get away, but it was too late. I saw the figure in the distance, two men on motorcycles, their bikes roaring as they sped down the road toward me. They had found me. I wasn't surprised. I knew they'd be relentless, but I wasn't going to let them take me without a fight. I slammed the truck into drive again, this time speeding forward, weaving between the trees and rocks that lined the road. The sound of the motorcycles grew louder behind me, but I didn't look back. I couldn't afford to. My eyes were locked on the road ahead, trying to find an escape. The truck jolted over a large rock, but I didn't slow down. The headlights of the motorcycles were closing in. They were gaining on me. I had to make a move. I took a sharp turn to the left, throwing the truck sideways. The tires screeched, and I heard the sound of the motorcycles behind me swerving to follow. But I wasn't going to let them catch up. I slammed the gas pedal down again, feeling the truck surge forward. The road twisted and turned, but I kept my eyes straight ahead, focusing on the path I had to take. The men on the motorcycles were right behind me, their engines growling, but I could hear them struggling to keep up. I was faster, but I wasn't sure how long that would last. The road was getting narrower, and the trees were starting to close in on me. I had no choice but to keep pushing, keep driving. Suddenly, the headlights of the motorcycles disappeared. For a moment, I thought I had lost them, but then I heard it. The roar of the engines, closer now than ever. They were still behind me. I couldn't outrun them forever. I had to think fast. I glanced to the side, seeing a small trail leading into the woods. It was narrow, barely wide enough for the truck, but it was my only chance. I turned the wheel sharply, sending the truck veering off the road and onto the trail. The truck lurched and bounced, the tires scraping against the rocks and dirt, but I kept the pedal to the metal. I heard the motorcycles behind me, but they couldn't keep up. The trail was too tight, too rough. I didn't know where it led, but I didn't care. I had to get away. The truck bounced again, harder this time, and I felt it sway dangerously to the side. I gripped the wheel tighter, trying to steady it. But then I heard a sharp crack, followed by the sound of the truck's engine sputtering. The truck jolted, and I felt it slow down. Panic shot through me. I slammed my foot down on the gas, but it was no use. The engine sputtered again, and the truck finally came to a stop. I hit the steering wheel in frustration. I couldn't believe this was happening. I had come this far, only to be stopped now. But I didn't have time to sit and wait. I grabbed the keys, yanked them out of the ignition, and jumped out of the truck. I looked around quickly, trying to figure out my next move. The motorcycles were getting closer. I didn't have much time. I ran into the woods, hoping the thick trees would provide cover. I moved as fast as I could, staying low to the ground. The night was silent except for the sound of my footsteps and the distant rumble of the motorcycles. I had to make it out of here, and I had to do it fast. The woods were dark, but my eyes had adjusted to the shadows. I moved. Silently, my feet brushing against the damp leaves on the ground, every step calculated and precise. The sound of the motorcycles was getting closer, and I could hear their engines growling in the distance. My breath was shallow, my heart pounding in my chest as I crouched low, trying to blend into the night. I needed to get farther, but I couldn't afford to rush. I had to make sure I wasn't followed. I kept my ears sharp, listening for any sounds that would tell me where they were. The men on the motorcycles were close. I could hear them talking, their voices cutting through the quiet of the woods. They were getting closer. I crouched behind a large tree, my eyes scanning the area. I could see the shadows of the riders moving through the trees, their lights flashing in and out as they searched. They were getting closer, and I could feel the tension rising in my chest. This was it. This was the moment I had to make my move. I turned and began moving deeper into the woods, my feet light, as I ducked under branches and moved past thick bushes. I didn't dare look back. I couldn't. I had to focus on what was in front of me. The motorcycles were still following, their engines revving louder now, the sound of the tires on dirt and gravel echoing through the trees. They were almost upon me. I had to make it to the other side of the woods. There was a road that led to the highway, and if I could make it there, I had a chance to escape. But getting there wasn't going to be easy. The trail through the woods was narrow, winding, and uneven. I had to move quickly, but I couldn't afford to make a sound. I stumbled once, catching myself on a low branch, but I didn't stop. I couldn't afford to stop. The sound of the motorcycles was deafening now, right behind me, and I could feel the heat from the engines as they closed in. I turned sharply, hoping to lose them in the dense thicket, but the trail ahead was still too narrow. I heard one of the motorcycles rev louder, and I knew they had spotted me. There was no turning back now. I had to fight. I could hear the leader of the group, shouting orders, his voice cutting through the night air. Get him. Don't let him get away. I didn't have much time. I pushed myself harder, feeling the burn in my legs as I ran faster. The sound of the engines was so close now, I could feel the ground vibrating beneath me. I had to get to the road. I had to get to safety. I reached a clearing and spotted the road ahead. It was just a few hundred yards, but it might as well have been miles. I pushed harder, my feet pounding the ground, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I could hear the motorcycles right behind me now, and I knew they were closing in. But I wouldn't stop. Not for anything. I reached the road and looked both ways. No cars in sight. I didn't hesitate. I ran into the road, waving my arms wildly in the air. I had to stop them. I had to make sure they saw me. And then, just as I thought I was going to be hit, the motorcycles came into view. But they weren't the ones chasing me. They were chasing something else. A van. It was speeding down the road, its tires screeching as it swerved in and out of lanes, trying to outrun the motorcycles. The motorcycles weren't after me. They were after the van. I had no idea who was in it, but I didn't care. I had to get away. I ducked behind a tree, hoping they wouldn't see me, but my heart was racing in my chest. What was going on? Why were the motorcycles chasing this van? And what did it have to do with Maria's daughter? The van disappeared into the distance, and the motorcycles followed, but I didn't feel safe. I couldn't just go back to Maria and her daughter now. I couldn't risk leading them back to her. I stood there, my mind racing, trying to figure out my next move. I could hear the sound of the motorcycles getting farther away, and I knew I had to act fast. The moment they were gone, I bolted for the woods again, moving as quietly as I could. I had to stay hidden. I had to keep moving. The trail ahead was dark, and I couldn't see where I was going, but I pushed on. I couldn't stop. Not yet. I had made a promise, and I couldn't break it now. The adrenaline was starting to wear off, and exhaustion was creeping in, but I knew I couldn't afford to slow down. Not when Maria and her daughter were depending on me. I had to keep them safe. I had to figure out what was really going on. I had to get answers. The further I ran, the more the weight of everything settled in. These men, the motorcycles, the van, everything was connected. And I had no idea how, but I was going to find out. I had no choice. The forest stretched out in front of me, but it didn't feel like it would be enough. I could feel them getting closer again, and I had no way to outrun them this time. My heart was racing, and my legs felt like they were made of lead. But I had no choice. I wasn't giving up. Not now. Not ever. My breath was coming in short, ragged gasps as I pushed through the dense underbrush, the weight of the night's events crashing down on me. The motorcycles were gone for now, but I couldn't shake the feeling that they were still out there, somewhere, watching and waiting. I kept moving, though. I had to. Maria and her daughter were still in danger, and I couldn't let my guard down. The woods stretched on, endless and dark, but I knew that somewhere, there had to be a way out. The crunch of my boots against the wet ground was the only sound I could hear, and even that seemed too loud in the silence. I couldn't shake the image of Maria's face, her eyes filled with fear, trusting me to protect her and her daughter. The promise I made to Mikey echoed in my head, and the weight of it felt heavier with every step. I had to get them out of this mess. I had to make sure they were safe. But the question still lingered. What were those men after? What was so important about Mikey's dog tag, and why did it matter so much to them? I didn't have the answers, but I knew I had to find them. My thoughts kept racing as I moved deeper into the woods, trying to put some distance between me and the danger that was still lurking. The night was pitch black now, and the only light came from the faint glow of the moon through the trees. My breath fogged in front of me, and the cold began to settle in my bones. I needed to find shelter, somewhere to regroup and figure out my next move. As I continued on, I noticed a faint glow in the distance. It wasn't much, but it was enough to catch my attention. I moved cautiously toward it, my steps careful and deliberate, trying not to make a sound. As I got closer, the light grew brighter, and I could make out the silhouette of a small cabin ahead. It was old, run down, but it looked like it could provide the cover I needed. I approached quietly, making sure no one was around. The last thing I needed was to be caught off guard. I reached the door and gave it a tentative push. It creaked open, the sound echoing in the night. I slipped inside, closing the door behind me as quietly as possible. The cabin was dark, but there was a faint smell of wood and old furniture in the air. I moved deeper inside, my eyes slowly adjusting to the darkness. The place looked abandoned, but it wasn't the first time I had found myself in a rundown place like this. I needed to keep my wits about me. I couldn't afford to be careless. I checked the windows, making sure they were secure. The last thing I needed was to be ambushed in a place like this. As I moved toward the back of the cabin, I heard a soft sound, a rustling, a shuffle. My body tensed, and my hand instinctively went to the knife at my belt. I wasn't sure what to expect, but I wasn't taking any chances. The sound came again, and I took a cautious step forward. My eyes scanned the darkness, trying to make out the source of the noise. And then I saw it, someone moving in the shadows. My heart skipped a beat. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice low and steady. The figure stopped moving, and for a moment, the room was silent. I didn't know if it was Maria, her daughter, or someone else, but I wasn't going to take any chances. "It's me," a voice said, and I instantly recognized it. "Maria?" I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. "What are you doing here?" I asked, my voice softening. She stepped fully into the dim light, her face strained with worry. "I couldn't stay back there," she said quietly. "I don't trust them. I don't know what's going on, but I can't just wait for them to come after us again." I nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. I had been thinking the same thing. The men were still out there, and I couldn't let them find us. "You did the right thing," I said, my voice firm. "We have to stick together. We'll figure this out, but we need to stay hidden for now." Maria's eyes flickered to the door, her hands clenched tightly in front of her. "What now?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I looked around the cabin, taking in the surroundings. There was no way to know how long we'd be safe here. The men would keep looking for us. We had to keep moving, but I needed a plan. "We stay low for now," I said, walking over to the small table in the corner. "We wait until we can figure out who those guys are and what they want. But right now, we need to rest. We're not going to make it if we're too exhausted." I turned to her and her daughter. The girl had been so quiet, so still, clutching that dog tag like it was the only thing she had left of her father. I could see the fear in her eyes, but there was something else there too. Something strong, something that reminded me so much of Mikey. She had his strength, even at her young age. I wasn't about to let that be taken from her. Maria nodded, her face softening a little. "I trust you," she said, her voice breaking. "I don't know who else to trust, but I trust you." I gave her a reassuring smile, though inside, I was anything but calm. I was starting to feel like we were walking into something far bigger than I could handle. But I had made a promise, and I wasn't going to back down. Not now. Not ever. We had a long road ahead of us, and the danger wasn't over. But for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt like we had a chance. A slim one, maybe, but a chance nonetheless. We were going to fight for it, together. The air felt different in the morning light. It was colder, sharper, the kind of cold that cut straight through to your bones. I sat on the worn porch of the cabin, staring into the distance, trying to push away the thoughts that kept gnawing at me. The promise I made to Mikey was still there, looming over me, but now, it felt heavier than ever. I had tried to protect Maria and her daughter, but the danger wasn't over. The men were still out there, hunting for something I couldn't fully understand. They wanted Mikey's daughter, and I had no idea why. But I wasn't going to stop until I got answers. I glanced over at Maria, who was sitting inside, talking to her daughter in hushed tones. The girl hadn't said much since we'd arrived. Her eyes haunted, her small hands clutching the dog tag like it was the only thing keeping her tethered to the world. It broke me to see her like that. She was too young for this. Too young to be caught up in something so dangerous, so out of her control. But there was nothing I could do to change it. I had to keep moving, keep protecting them. I stood up, the gravel crunching beneath my boots, and walked toward the woods. I needed to clear my head. The forest was quiet. The only sound was the wind rustling through the trees, but it wasn't the peaceful silence it should have been. I knew I was running out of time. The men wouldn't stop. They were getting closer, and I could feel it in my gut. The hunt was on, and sooner or later, they would find us. I wasn't sure how much longer we could keep running, but I had to find a way to stop them. I had to get the answers. As I walked deeper into the woods, I kept thinking back to the night Mikey died. I had been right there, on the same mission, but I couldn't save him. He had always been the better man, the one who kept going when everything else fell apart. And now, his daughter was in danger because of some damn dog tag. I stopped walking, letting the silence fill the space around me. The memories flooded back, the sound of gunfire, the smoke, the chaos. I had been a soldier once, before the club took over, before everything turned into a blur of blood and violence. I wasn't that man anymore, but in that moment, I felt like he was right there with me. Mikey's voice echoed in my mind. You protect the ones you love, no matter what. I took a deep breath and wiped my face. I had made a promise, and I wasn't going to break it now. I couldn't. I turned back toward the cabin, my mind made up. I didn't know what the men wanted, but I knew I had to get ahead of them. I wasn't about to let them tear this family apart. I needed to talk to Maria. I needed her to understand that we couldn't stay here much longer. As I reached the cabin, I saw her standing outside, looking at me with those worried eyes. She knew I was thinking too much, but there was no other choice. We need to leave, I said, my voice steady but firm. The men, they're getting closer. We can't stay here. Maria nodded, not questioning me, but I could see the fear in her eyes. She was scared, and so was I. Where will we go? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't have an answer for her. I wasn't sure where we could go, but I knew we couldn't stay. We'll figure it out, I said, my voice hardening with determination. But we can't let them find us. We moved quickly, packing up what little we had. The truck was our only option, but I wasn't sure it would be enough to outrun the men who were still after us. We had to keep moving, but I had no idea where we were going. I just knew we couldn't stay here. As we drove away, the truck rumbled down the dirt road, the trees passing by in a blur. The town was behind us now, and we were heading into the unknown. But I wasn't going to let that stop me. I had no idea how this would end, but I was going to make sure it didn't end with Maria and her daughter in the hands of those men. The headlights of the truck cast long shadows ahead, but there was no clear path. We were driving into the darkness, into a future I couldn't predict, but I couldn't turn back. I looked over at Maria, who was holding her daughter's hand, the girl still clutching that damn dog tag. I knew what I had to do. We were going to keep moving. We were going to find out what those men were after, and we were going to stop them, no matter what it took.